Hello everyone. This is the second part of the story, Abe the Wizard. Chapter 5, Edmund's Boutique Shop. Abel knew how perfect his ruby was. His Horadric Cube was literally incapable of crafting something flawed. It didn't matter if the gemstone was only worth 3 gold coins before. The price was now increased to 100 times worth of that. If someone else knew about Horadric Cube, it would surely bring a lot of trouble to Abel. Edmund's Boutique Shop was a pretty trustworthy business brand. Plus, the price Yvette just offered was very pleasing from Abel's perspective, so he decided to take out the second gemstone from his bag. Abel passed over the ruby as he folded his bag in half, indicating that he only had 2 in total. I have another one. Please, I will sell it at any price you offer. Red and passionate, Yvette exclaimed in a tone that could be heard from a noble, now there's 2 of them, and they are just as perfect as each other. I need some supplement for my knight's training. Is there anything you recommend? Zach used supplements for his training every month. He liked to drink a special potion that would increase the flow of his chi before exercise. If Abel remembered correctly, the name of the potion was called a chi condensing potion. He wasn't sure about it, though. No one bothered explaining it to a child like him. The Edmund's Boutique Shop can provide you with the lesser chi condensing potion. It is priced at 10 gold coins per bottle. Yvette smiled, then paused for a sip of her coffee, telling you this may be bad for business, but there are a lot of unclean residues in the lesser potions and the side effects. Usually, if you take the potion for a month, you'd have to spend another month before your body can recover. How effective is the lesser potion? Abel asked. From his perspective, what mattered was that the potion could do what it was made to do. While Abel was a complete amateur in the use of potions, Yvette knew every detail there was to it. The best way to take the lesser potion is to have 5 bottles every month. With training, course. The 5 bottles can essentially double your performance results, which means that a month's training will be the same as that of 2. After that, you will have to take a month off before you can repeat the whole process all over again. If there is a lesser version of this potion, there must also be a greater version. Of course. If you take the greater potion, you'll only need to take 2 weeks off after every 5 bottles. 5 bottles of the greater potion are worth about 4 months of training. If you want something better, there is also what we call the greatest potion, and the monthly dosage can produce the same results as that of 5 months worth of training. You can take it without any break because of how pure it is, but they only come at 3 bottles per month for one person. Abel had his eyes wide open this entire time he was listening to the explanation. Yvette didn't want to appear rude, but the boy sitting across her was simply being way too cute. Sorry for the inconvenience, Yvette chuckled, but if you're looking for the chi condensing pill, the best ones we have in this store are just the greater potions. We sell them at 50 gold coins per bottle. If you're looking for the greatest potion, you'll have to visit our main headquarters. Abel wasn't going to pay for a potion that was 50 gold coins per bottle. He wasn't even going to ask how much the greatest potions were. To his knowledge, there weren't a lot of rich people in Fort Lee. Most would have had to sell their homes to afford a bottle of the greater potion. Out of a mysterious affection for the boy in front of her, Yvette leaned in to share some secrets with Abel. A lot of people don't know about this, Yvette softly whispered near Abel's ear. According to the potion master in our main headquarters, if a novice knight decides to take the chi condensing potion, it will actually be harder for him to advance his ways to become an official knight. It doesn't matter if the potion is lesser, greater, or greatest. The more you take these supplements, the more residues you will have inside your body, and that's going to counteract with your breakthrough process when you try to become an official knight. Abel didn't know why Yvette would be so kind to him, but he did realize how lucky he was to have her teach him so much about training with potions. All in their first meeting, too, so not only was he feeling very grateful, but he also began to develop more respect towards this very good-hearted girl. Thank you for your reminder, Miss Yvette. Abel spoke in an even more formal tone. What you just told me will be very crucial to me. If you don't mind answering to this, is there any potion that doesn't produce a side effect? Why, there is, of course, Yvette nodded her head. Sometimes when they are in the mood for it, the potion masters would make something called the Master's Chi Condensing Potion. There is no guarantee on the number of these Master's Potions, but one potion master is said to be able to produce 10 bottles of it every single year. Once the potions are ready, they are either given off as gifts for friends and families, or they are bought off by the rich and powerful. Yvette continued in an admiring and proud tone. In our annual auction event, our own potion master would put up 5 bottles of the Master's Chi Condensing Potion for sale. They are priced at more than 1,000 gold coins per bottle, and one bottle is enough for a novice knight to skip an entire year of training. If he didn't have his own Horadric Cube, Abel would have never considered taking potions for his training. Based on his previous performances, his talent looked more promising than both his father and brother. He was a genius, and it didn't matter if he was only 12 years old. With enough time and effort, he could easily become an official knight. Still, the idea of using a Master's Chi Condensing Potion sounded very attractive to Abel. A year worth of training without any side effects, and all it would take was some money. It was the perfect job. His Horadric Cube. Having come to a decision, Abel raised his head to make his purchase. I'll take 54 bottles of the lesser Chi Condensing Potion. Actually, with the money that's left, can I also get a small crossbow? Maybe something I can hold with just one hand. Abel knew how dangerous this world was. He could be ambushed by a starving beast just by walking on an open path. It was true that he was smart enough to kill that shadow panther back then, but it was best not to rely on luck in every single fight. That being said, it was always good to carry some gears with him while going to places. Abel wanted a sword and some armors, too, but his budget was way too low for that. Actually, even if he had more money with him, he probably still wouldn't use it here. He was nowhere good enough to hide his own secrets, his cube, yet. If he was going to spend money on equipment, he'd like it to be something that people couldn't see. By this logic, a small crossbow seemed like a decent option. Just like that dagger Zack gave him, Abel could easily hide a weapon like this somewhere on him. Come to think of it, it would be nice to be able to perform sneak attacks both within close range and long range. How about this small crossbow? It was crafted by the dwarves. Yvette went and placed a gray crossbow on the table, along with the potions Abel had ordered. Abel tried lifting the crossbow with just one arm. It was a very delicate piece of work, with a little less than a kilogram in weight. He didn't quite like its appearance, though, since every part of it was just painted in plain gray. Besides, there were some very ugly holes that were punched through the handle. This is a second-hand item, Yvette explained in a bemused way as Abel had a very questionable look on his face. I know what you are thinking, but the dwarves did a pretty good job when they first crafted this. Usually, a brand new crossbow with this kind of craftsmanship would have cost more than 500 gold coins. There were supposed to be some gems on the handle, but someone else decided to chip them off to make extra profit. Besides, no one liked this color. No wonder it would be in the store for this long. I'll take it, Abel stated. He knew Yvette was being good to him. He wasn't sure why she was willing to go so far to help him, but he knew she wasn't the type to lie. Be careful when you take these lesser potions. You have a long road ahead of you, Yvette said as she placed the Chi Condensing Potion in a box. She also grabbed some ammunition for Abel's crossbow. Thank you, Miss Yvette. I'll make sure that I take these potions with caution, Abel responded with sincerity. He wanted to appear reliable in front of Yvette. Once Abel had gotten out of the store, he had 54 bottles of the lesser Chi Condensing Pill, 1 small crossbow, and 5 crossbow arrows. Yvette, on the other hand, was sitting next to the window on the boutique shop's second floor. While watching as Abel slowly made his way back, she couldn't help but think about her little brother who had left the family for 2 years by now. If she could see him now, he would probably be just as big as Abel. Chapter 6, Master's Potion. It was quite late when Abel caught up with Norman. The sun was slightly leaned towards the west by the time they saw each other. If they didn't go back to the Bennett castle right away, they would have had to travel during the night, which was not safe at all. Norman saw the box Abel was holding, but he didn't say anything about it. As far as he was concerned, what mattered wasn't how much money his young master had spent or what he had bought. He was a bodyguard, and the only thing he cared about was his master's safety. That being the case, Abel still didn't want to let anyone see his box. He was going to put it in his Horadric Cube before, but there were far too few slots for him to put in his chi condensing pill. It was 1 bottle per slot, so the most he could store was 10. He needed 2 more for his Tome of Town portal, meaning that the only way to go was to carry most of the stuff with his own hands. Fortunately, the 2 got back without facing any danger on the way, and Abel picked the right time to arrive at home. Zach was just practicing horse riding with the Knight of Bennett. No one, not his father, his mother, or his brother, no one was going to ask him what he had bought in town. This was a family of royals. They respected each other as royals. Every member, regardless of age, had rights to his or her own privacy. Abel was loved by his parents, but the love he felt was very different from the one he experienced on Earth. During his life back on Earth, parents showed love by interfering with every aspect of their child's life. They had to have a say in the child's education, social life, romantic life, marriage, and anything else. Any secret that a child had was considered a violation of the trust between them. The rules were very different here. Every time there was an important choice to make, Abel's parents would always listen to what Abel wanted, no matter how drastic the consequences were. As the second son of the family, the path ahead of Abel would be nothing but harsh for him. Now, the Knight of Bennett knew this. He knew this all too well, but he decided to agree with his love for his son. It was a different kind of love, different from the kind that Abel experienced from his previous parents. They were equal in their weight, however. Abel knew that, and he was grateful to be so blessed in his 2 very long lifetimes. After coming back to his room, Abel quickly opened his box and took out a bottle of the chi condensing potion. Whilst facing the sunset, he could see that the bottle was surrounded by arcs of white light which, in ways that were inapplicable to normal physics, kept on flashing and sparking as they swirled around. It was only a lesser potion, yes, but by appearance alone, it would be worth so much if it was found on Earth. Speaking of Earth, Abel missed his home now. He never had a nostalgia for the whole year that he came here, but something kicked in when he saw that tome of portal yesterday. Whatever. Just don't think about it, he forced himself. Right now, the important thing was his experiment. If Abel's hypothesis was confirmed, his training speed would be much faster than where it was currently. Abel inserted 3 lesser potions into the Horadric Cube, then lightly pressed onto the transmute button. After a white light flashed by, the 3 bottles of the chi condensing potion emerged into just one. It was not surrounded by white arcs of light, however, but a beautiful ray of blue. It worked. Abel had never seen a greater chi condensing potion before, but this should be it. There was no doubt about it. The Horadric Cube never got its formulas wrong. It wasn't like he cared too much about it, but a smirk suddenly emerged on Abel's face. If 3 bottles of the lesser potion cost 30 gold coins in total, and a bottle of the greater potion costs 50 gold coins, he just made 20 coins worth of profit. It was a weird thought to have in a serious time like this, but it was kind of funny in a way. Abel inserted 3 more lesser potions into his cube. For reasons he himself wasn't sure of, he was already feeling like a potion master, or an alchemist figuring out the right proportions for his concoction. As excited as he was, Abel's hands never stopped. He just kept on transmuting the lesser potions into greater potions, then lined up the finished products on his table. Pretty soon, 54 bottles of the lesser chi condensing potions were turned into 18 bottles of the greater chi condensing potion. Abel was about to scream at this point. Even if he couldn't turn the greater potions into the greatest potion, he was pretty much guaranteed a way to afford his living now. If he wanted to, he could head into the potion brewing business at any time he wanted. He could become a renowned potion master by selling large quantities of the greater chi condensing potion. Becoming a knight was his topmost preference, of course, but it was always good to have some sort of backup plan. Abel calmed himself once more. Then, he inserted 3 bottles of the greater potion into his Horadric Cube. Without any failure this time, the 3 greater potions were mixed into one. It was a bottle surrounded with golden arcs of light. Inside was a potion that could only be produced by an expert. It was the greatest potion which, although makeable given the right amount of experience, was not something that could be sold as a regular item. The greatest potion was inferior to a master's potion, but the creation of both required the brewer to be in the right zone. There was something special about this potion. Abel didn't know how much it was worth exactly, but his guess was just as good as anybody else's. Well, there wasn't a lot of potion masters in the duchy, he knew at least that much. Soon, 18 greater potions were turned into 6 bottles of greatest potions. Abel was right. It was the right choice for him to spend all his money on potions. He put the 3 bottles of the greatest potion into the cube, and just like all the times before, everything in the slots vanished when a white light flashed out. What came out was a bottle of a master's chi condensing potion. It was surrounded by arcs of dark, golden light, and there was a thick texture to the liquid that was inside. The liquid itself was amber in color. Strangely, though, it was not translucent like all the other potions. With a gentle shake of its container, Abel would see that it was a little bit sticky. One more time. At the end of the day, Abel produced 2 bottles of the master's chi condensing potion. He produced 2 bottles of the ultimate potion, which would bear no effects whatsoever to its user. Now, what should he do about these potions? He could consume it right here, but that would expose the existence of the Horadric Cube. He couldn't allow that to happen if he was to survive in this world. The better option was to store it somewhere safe. Whatever Abel was planning to do next, safety always came first. The more Abel knew about this world, the less safe he began to feel. While everything could be explained by science on Earth, the logic seemed to work very differently here. The injury on Norman's leg should take a few months to recover, but a lesser divine act was enough to treat it on the spot. Knowing something like this was actually more worrisome than relieving, the more you think about it. With that in mind, if Fort Lee was just a small town, what kind of unexplainable, unthinkable things could Abel see if he went to a bigger town? A bigger city, maybe? Chapter 7, Father's Teachings. The Bennett Castle always held its dinner on time. Since there were knights in the house, the time to eat was set at 8 o'clock at night. The meal, as always, was limited to 3 things: beef, porridge, and mashed potatoes. Due to financial issues, the beef was not flavored with anything at all. Spices were restricted to only the very rich nobles. They had to be harvested all the way from the Double Moon Forest, which was a faraway territory ruled by the elves. The further a product was from its place of origin, the pricier it was. This was especially true when there were so many merchants involved in the transportation process. Like always, it was a quiet, yet heartwarming dinner with the family. After a whole day of workout, combat, and adventure, Abel wanted to go back to his room for a shower. He didn't like the sewage system here, though, so he decided to make one himself. The Bennett Castle relied on one underground stream for its water supply. Like most castles built in this world, no resource could be sent in the fort if it was surrounded by invaders, so the water was crucial for self-subsistence. If it was a castle built for a higher lord, the sewage system would probably be big enough for a few thousand people. The Bennett Castle could provide enough water for a few hundred people, which was quite a lot in itself. There were less than 100 residents living here, guards and servants included, so the water was not an issue at all. 0 current novels. To build his own irrigation system, Abel decided to find the carpenter of the Bennett Castle. He ordered the carpenter to build a water wheel. It was meant to be powered by the underground stream, and there would be some pipes connected to it to let the water flow inside a big wooden box, which would be stored on the top floor of the castle. Then, using some bamboo hardened with fire, pipes were built to let the water into the bathroom. Abel had bronze in mind at the start, but metal was far too expensive. There was no mine inside the castle. No blacksmith for hire either. The Bennett family couldn't even use iron to make the pipes. After a long, hard thought to himself, Abel came to the conclusion that bamboo was the best option available. Once heated up with fire, it could be bent, hardened and used for a variety of construction work. Most importantly, it was extremely cheap. After the pipes were ready, Abel had the carpenter make him a full-size wooden bathtub, a wooden washing basin, and even a flush toilet with seat. For once, things were starting to look a bit modern. Lumber was worth almost nothing in this world. Apart from some of very rare species, anyone with an axe could get some wood from the forest. Speaking of which, the Bennett family owned all the trees within a 100-mile radius from the castle. Lumberjacks and carpenters were hired, of course, but their main job was with planting crops in the field. You wouldn't get paid much for chopping down trees. Thanks to Abel's innovative suggestions, every room of the castle was renovated with the same design plan. The carpenter, after being paid a generous sum for his work, was ordered to sign a contract with the Knight of Bennett. Without his master's permission, he was restricted from making the same system again for anyone else. Hence, the blueprint of the wooden irrigation system was locked inside the Bennett family vault. As a nobleman who grew up knowing a fair share of things, the Knight of Bennett knew how life-threatening this device could be. If some high lord happened to know about it, he would most likely keep it all in his own family collection, meanwhile killing anyone who happened to know something about it. The Knight of Bennett was all too familiar with this sort of thing. Which was why Abel didn't invent anything afterward. Without the right status and strength, any creative ideas could bring catastrophe to him and his family. For the thousands of years of this world's history, there had been no change to the way society was structured. It was a very different story to that of Earth, which was very easily influenced by instability and interferences. Rules could vanish and remerge within a span of a few centuries, and nothing could ever be referred to as constant. Abel, come stay with Zach, the Knight of Bennett commanded as Abel was about to head back to his room. You are a rank 1 novice knight now. You are now worthy of my tutoring. After coming to the training room, Abel could see that the servants had already prepared the wooden dummies for him. There were some wooden swords hanging on the wall, and the Knight of Bennett grabbed one to give it to him. I have heard about what you did. The Knight of Bennett stared at Abel. You killed a shadow panther with the strength of a beginner knight. You surprised me, son. Even if you did it with Norman's help, I am still very surprised about it. For my whole life, I have seen countless knights which are more talented than I could ever be. They were stronger than me, faster than me, but none of them lived to be as old as I am now. Do you know why? To Abel's surprise, the Knight of Bennett was suddenly giving him a lecture. For all the time he had been in this world, he had never heard so much word coming out his father's mouth before. How did I survive to be standing here today? It's because a knight's strongest shield is his sword. The fastest sword is also the sturdiest shield there is. If the knight is fast, he can charge when he's on a horse. When he gets down the horse, he can pull on a heavy bow with a blink of an eye. Now, there are a lot of geniuses in this world. Some of them decided to become the fastest men they could be. Some of them decided to become the strongest men they could be. Now, I am not the strongest man there is. I'm also not the fastest man there is. However, I happen to be the heir of our family, and what our ancestors have left for us is a full training routine dedicated to knights. Because of my heritage, I became the strongest man among the fastest man, and I became the fastest man among the strongest men. The Knight of Bennett widened his eyes, called out in a rather emotional tone, what our ancestors gave us is the most complete system there is. Generation after generation, they passed it on to me without making any sort of adjustment. In the near future, I will fulfill my role and pass this treasure on to you both. Remember this, no gold, no renowned weapon, or armor, none of these will be ever as precious as heritage. Heritage, my sons, heritage is the most precious treasure there is. Zack, show your brother how to form an attack. The Knight of Bennett threw a wooden word towards Zack, to which Zack responded with a glare of a beast. He pointed towards the dummy with his sword, drew a light breath from his mouth, and instantly changed into his charging position. Abel could just barely see it. The dummy was sent flying in an instant. And while it was still in mid-air, Zack quickly went to stab it at 3 different spots. It was the thigh, the waist, and the throat, all executed in one sequence of movement. It was like something coming straight out of textbook. "You are faster than this," the Knight of Bennett said. The father was always strict in his demands. Zack understood that, so he quickly responded with a nod. "Can you see this clearly, Abel? This is a classic knight's attack. You break through your enemy's defense with a charge and finish the fight with a quick slash to their vital spot. Every part of this sequence takes thousands of years to refine. Your role is to execute these movements as perfectly as you can. There is no need to make any kind of adjustment. Countless blood has been spilled to come up with what you are looking at right now." The Knight of Bennett continued with a slightly ridiculing tone, "There are always some so-called geniuses who try to be creative with this. None of them are alive now. Listen here, son. What you should be doing is to remember these movements. Turn them into your instincts. Use them before you have any second thoughts." Abel felt so proud to have killed that shadow panther back then, but looking at Zack was a real wake-up call for him. He could be as smart as he wanted to be with his tricks, but they would always be futile against a properly trained knight. Even Zack could dominate him without any resistance. For the remaining days, Abel continued on his training routine. He practiced combat techniques during the daytime and improved his muscle strength with the metal armor at night. Before he went to bed, he would always practice his night breathing techniques. There was a lot more beef on the dinner table that night. From that point onward, Abel was starting to receive the same meal size as Zack. While the Knight of Bennett hadn't said anything about it, he felt like his father had come to some sort of decision. Chapter 8, A Shocking Decision. Being a gym trainer probably had something to do with this. For reasons he wasn't sure of, Abel learned how to fight as knight fairly quickly. He had good reflexes and forms. What he lacked in experience and strength, he would certainly make up for as he got older. The Bennett family system taught the use of multiple types of weapons. There was archery, lancing, sword and shield play, heavy shield, etc. After about half a year of non-stop training, Abel learned all there was to learn. It was kind of unfair for Zack, in a way, so much so that he had often made complaints to the spirits. "But that took me more a year." He would often cry out, and the Knight of Bennett would always wear an ominous look on his face. Abel wasn't sure what his father was thinking of, but he knew something was about to happen soon. Over these past few months, Abel did not take a single drop of his master's potion. After learning about the importance of heritage from his father, he decided that it was only right to take supplements after he knew all the right techniques. Still, in a very short period of time, he managed to become a rank 2 novice knight with just his raw talent. On one particular night, Abel knew something was wrong when he sat down for dinner. He noticed how red and swollen Nora's eyes were. He also saw a very resolute expression on his father's face. "Abel, my son," the Knight of Bennett stood up as Abel had just picked up his fork, "you are the most talented child I have seen in all of my life. The Holy Light has granted you wisdom and courage, but the Bennett family does not have the resources to raise you to your full potential. This is a great loss to the family name and a disgrace to one who guides us all." The Knight of Bennett threw a glance at his wife, then back to his 2 sons. He continued on in a coarser voice, "I have made an agreement with a fellow knight of mine. His name is Marshall. For the next few years, Abel will train to be a knight under his teaching. If Abel manages to meet his expectations, he will be inheriting the unicorn symbol, which is the coat of arms of the Harry family. Abel knew who the Knight of Marshall was. The Knight of Marshall was his father's best friend. They fought alongside each other during the war against the orcs. During the most desperate times, they saved each other's life and came back home together. Unlike the Knight of Bennett, the Knight of Marshall never had a child. His only wife died in an incident, and he was never married after that. For all the years that the Marshall family had been without an heir, he just kept on staying in the castle where his wife was buried. It was no easy choice for the Knight of Bennett to send Abel away. Abel wasn't just going to have his surname changed. As a matter of fact, he was going to cut his ties with his real family. He would be wearing a different coat of arms on his clothes, his armor, and his flag. That's probably how it was going to be for the rest of his life. Having a talented child was a very troubling thing for the Knight of Bennett. He had thought all kinds of different options before, including sending him to his wife's father, Keith. Still, it had been a long time since he last contacted Keith. Besides, Keith was a merchant. He had money, yes, but simply having money was not enough to raise someone to be a knight. Also, Keith lived all the way up at Koror Duchy, which made it very hard to keep in touch with Abel if he was sent over there. Seth Bennett. That was the real name of the Knight of Bennett. He was commonly referred with the Bennett title because, well, he was the only one of his kind living on this plane. 2 centuries ago, his ancestors became royals because of their contributions to the war. They were also rewarded with a piece of land. Its name was originally the Bennett Honorary Lord's Domain, but now it was just the Bennett Knight's Domain. The direct descendants of the Bennett family lived in Baekong City, which was a major city located inside Carmel Duchy. If Abel was sent there, it was very likely for him to become a regular knight. There was a trade-off for doing so, however. It would mean that Abel would become a bodyguard for a direct descendant of the Bennett family. He would have to sacrifice his own personal freedom, and if the circumstances called for it, his own life. There was no way the Knight of Bennett would let that happen to his second son. There was another reason: the Knight of Bennett wouldn't want Abel to lose the status of a royalty. It was something that he had already decided, long before Abel was even born. As the proud Knight of Bennett, he would only make a request from his kinsman if the Bennett Knight's domain were to regain its old title as the territory of an honorary lord. It was a crucial way of him maintaining his pride, so to speak. Marshal Harry was a different man to the Knight of Bennett. First of all, his family had a very prestigious name in Baekong City. With the help of his family, Marshal Harry was also rewarded with a knight's domain after a war. It was land just 300 miles away from the Bennett Knight's domain, mainly because of his ties with the Knight of Bennett. Everything there was newly built, apparently. Even the castle was made of new bricks and stones. The Harry family had a long and fine history to it. A few elite knights came to be because of them. And while their philosophy was different from that of the Bennett family, the two had great respect for each other's achievements in the past. Marshal Harry had always wanted to adopt a son. He had said it on many occasions, but it was hard to find someone with the right conditions. He wasn't just looking for a child that he could look after. He was looking for an heir that he could pass his family name on to. That being said, the child he would adopt must have royal blood inside of him. Ironically, though, most royal children already had their futures planned ahead of them. Suppose a man had 3 sons. Even if the eldest was to become the heir, it was very easy for him to disqualify after, say, a lost duel or a common disease. Whatever might take away his life, the next child would always be a backup solution. And there really wasn't a royal family with just one child. Everyone wanted more kids. The only problem, really, was with how much wealth was distributed to educate them. Abel was a genius. The Knight of Bennett was very certain of that. He knew how talented Abel was, and there was no way he would let that talent go to waste. Yes, even if such a decision comes with a cost. Sending Abel away was a great loss to the Bennett family. All because there wasn't enough money in the family. No wonder everyone was so grim during dinner. Zack kept having his beef sliding out of his fork, which was an act that would usually receive the immediate condemnation from the Knight of Bennett. Strangely, however, the Knight of Bennett just kept on eating his food in silence. Nora was the only one who didn't hide away her emotions. She barely ate anything during dinner time, and instead spent of her time sobbing and wiping away her tears. After dinner was over, the Knight of Bennett had Abel come to his study for a chat. As the place for storing some of the family's most important documents, the study was usually locked up for anyone except the Knight of Bennett himself. That being said, it was the first time that Abel had laid his eyes on it. Just by a first glance, Abel could tell that it was a very big room. On one side of the white wall, there were portraits of previous owners of the Bennett castle. The other side was stuffed with tall bookshelves, which contained various sizes of red or black books. In the middle of the study was a big, wooden desk. From what Abel could see, it had a very smooth surface to it, which was most likely due to the years of paperwork that were signed on top of it. This was, in other words, the core of Bennett's Knight domain. All commands, big or small, were officialized at this very spot right here. The Knight of Bennett walked over towards the desk. He dragged out a big box made of oak wood. It was a fancy box, laced with deer hides and had a red bronze handle on top of it. As the Knight of Bennett opened it, Abel could see a tidy set of armor inside. A half-body cuirassier. Both the front and back were decorated with small, shiny square pieces of metal. From the shoulder to the wrist were multiple layers of galvanized iron. This was quite an unusual set of armor, which was a mix between a leather set and a metal set. Not only was it cheaper than a full steel gear or chainmail, but it was also more resistant than something purely made of animal skins. I got this cuirassier during my battle against the orcs. After I killed an inferno bovine, I carried its corpse to an armorsmith and had him craft an armor set from it, said the Knight of Bennett as he took out the lower half of the armor from the box. It was a pair of leather jeans with galvanized iron as the knee guard. Here is a light long sword, a pair of leather boots and a pair of gloves. I don't have a lot of previous things to give you, my child. Abel's eyes were starting to swell it. He noticed this armor set now. It was his father's backup set. As it was impossible for a knight to have possess only one set of armor, he had to have a backup to wear when the original was sent for maintenance. If the original set was elsewhere, the Knight of Bennett would have to fight without protection. But there was no hesitation. No refusal, either. As Abel took over the box, he was starting to feel the weight of a father's love. There was no other gift that could be as precious as this. After Abel came back to his room, he saw that his mother had already been waiting for him. Unlike the Knight of Bennett, her parting gifts were much simpler. There were jackets, shirts, a training suit, formal suits and several pieces of handkerchiefs. It was clothing, more clothing and nothing else. Nora didn't cry this time. She just held on to Abel's hand and talked to him. She spoke slowly and patiently. It was mostly about how Abel should get along with others once he was in the outside world. The night was quiet, but the Bennett castle remained alight. Nobody had slept. This marks the end of part 2 of the story, Abe the Wizard. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.